Hello, and thank you for joining the Hemp special session as part of the 2021 Virtual Southeast Regional Fruit and Vegetable Conference. I'm Timothy Coulong. I'm a professor of horticulture at the University of Georgia, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Pesticide CEU and CCA credits are available for most presentations offered during the live Southeast Regional Conference. Please check the Pesticide CEU Guide for a list of approved presentations and participating states. The Pesticide CEU Guide is located in the Event Resources tab under the Media Player. The guide is also available at the Resources Center located on the main menu of the conference platform. Please note, pesticide credits will only be available for registered attendees and only during the live conference. Credits will not be available for on-demand viewing later. There is a simple three-step process to receive pesticide CEU and CCA credits. First, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen and type your first name, last name, and the states for which you're requesting credits. Again, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen and type your first name, last name, and the states for which you are requesting credits. You will need to do this for every presentation to request CEU credits. The second step is to sign out at the end of every presentation. To sign out, go to the audience chat box. Again, type your first name, last name, and the states for which you're requesting credits, and then you will be reminded to sign out at the end of the presentation. The third step is to complete the pesticide CEU registration. You only have to complete this registration one time during the conference. This is not required to do with every presentation. To access the pesticide CEU registration web link, open the Pesticide CEU Guide on the Event Resources tab located under the Media Player. The Pesticide CEU registration web link is located on the front cover of the guide. This presentation is pre-recorded to reduce technical difficulties. We will be answering your questions, however, live at the end of the presentation. You may submit a question at any point during this presentation by typing your question in the question box and pressing send. And please don't forget to thank our 2021 conference sponsors and exhibitors by visiting the virtual trade show and the featured products pavilion. And lastly, don't forget to join us each morning for coffee chats and in the evening for networking. Check the conference agenda for details. Now, I'd like to introduce Mike Evans, Program Director for Plant Protection with the Georgia Department of Agriculture. He will be presenting a hemp program update from the Georgia Department of Agriculture.
Good afternoon, everyone. I trust everyone is well and staying safe. For the next few minutes, I'll give the Georgia Department of Agriculture update on hemp. I want to remind everyone of our hemp webpage. You can go to the department's website listed at the top of the page here, and from there you can click on the big green button on your right and it will take you to our hemp program page. Our hemp page is one of our primary ways of providing information to our license holders. You can find documents we think will be helpful to you, including a list of Georgia processors, the Georgia Hemp Farming Act, the regulations, as well as a link to the USDA National Hemp Program website. This is also where you will submit your hemp grower license application. So please bookmark this page and check back periodically for updates. I want to mention a couple of legislative changes made last year because there still seems to be some confusion. It is now legal for a Georgia grower to provide or sell hemp to an out-of-state processor, as well as to sell hemp to another licensed grower. If you remember, these actions were initially prohibited, but the legislature changed the Georgia Hemp Farming Act last year. So now you can buy your hemp clones or transplants from a Georgia nursery, provided they have a valid license from us. Several people have asked me about additional changes to the Georgia Hemp Farming Act this year. I have not heard of any discussion, so I have no idea if the General Assembly will take up any changes in the upcoming session, which begins next week. We received a lot of questions last year why the Georgia program is different from programs in surrounding states. Well, that has to do with when the program began. The 2014 Farm Bill allowed the cultivation of hemp in a pilot or a research program if the state passed legislation making hemp legal. The requirements of the 2014 Farm Bill were vague in some areas, so it gave states some latitude on how to deal with plants testing over 0.3% THC. So several states did pass legislation and began their hemp programs. Well, as you know, the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp production throughout the U.S. Since Georgia did not have a pilot program, we're under the 2018 Farm Bill requirements, and some of that latitude has been taken away. For states under the 2014 Farm Bill, USDA actually has to approve our state hemp production plans, and USDA requires those plans to include specific language and requirements in our regulations. Those states operating under the 2014 Farm Bill requirements are allowed to continue by USDA under those provisions into 2021. And this provides those states with the time and opportunity to change their laws if necessary. Now, it's my understanding that all states will be under the same requirements in 2022. We'll talk a little bit about 2020 in review here. Now, I realize that very few people like to read laws and regulations. I don't like to read them either. However, currently, hemp is still somewhat a highly regulated crop. And it appeared to us that the majority of those applying for a license last year were not very familiar with the Georgia Hemp Farming Act or the regulations. And I'm not saying that you need to memorize the law or the regulations, but I certainly recommend that you do spend some time and become familiar with them. There are record keeping and reporting requirements, both reporting to us as well as to FSA offices. And we are required to go out and audit and look at records that are required by growers or for growers to keep to ensure that the records are being maintained. And this is a requirement from USDA. So for us to be in compliance, it would help everyone for your records. I want to talk about corrective action plans for a minute. A corrective action plan is something that's actually required by USDA. If it's discovered that a grower unintentionally or negligently violated the Georgia Hemp Farming Act or the regulations, then the state and the grower will enter into a corrective action plan. And these plans are a legal document, and basically it's a plan on how you intend on to avoid violating state or federal regulations in the future. So it's a combination of both correction and compliance. An intentional violation is handled differently, but this is for unintentional violations. The plans last for at least 2 years and include additional reporting requirements on the grower's part and may require additional audits from us. One thing to be aware of, that 3 violations in a 5-year period, the federal regulations, require the loss of your hemp grower license for a 5-year period. So what are some examples of violations? Production of non-compliant cannabis or cannabis that exceeds 0.3% THC, not maintaining the appropriate records, and not submitting reports as required are also violations. The application process, we only accept online applications. very few people submitted a completed application the first time last year. Now, if a application is submitted with information missing or incorrect, we will notify you and let you go back and edit the application so you do not have to submit a new one. Now, there were several items that caused applicants problems last year, and I have listed most of them on this slide. The GPS coordinates were a problem for a significant number of applicants, and we only accept GPS coordinates in decimal format. If you are taking GPS coordinates in degree, minute, second format, that needs to be converted, and just putting a decimal into that coordinate is not correct conversion. You actually need to download an app or go to a website to do that. We verify each GPS coordinate with Google Maps or Google Earth and compare that with the picture or the map that you have provided with your application. So not only were a lot of coordinates in the wrong format, but a lot of them were actually for the wrong location entirely. Coordinates must be provided for each grow site, and a grow site is simply an area or a property where you intend to produce hemp. The coordinates are to be taken in the middle of a field or at the entrance to a greenhouse or a structure. Currently, the Georgia Hemp Farming Act prohibits anyone with a felony conviction, regardless of how long ago it was, from obtaining a grower license. Even people who have been pardoned are not eligible for a hemp grower license if the felony conviction is still on the background check. One final item: once we accept the application as completed and issue the license, updates or changes such as adding a field or a greenhouse cannot currently be made. You have to wait for the renewal to make those types of changes. Last year, we issued 143 grower licenses. Now, I was not sure if we would only have a handful of applications or if we would be overwhelmed with them. We did receive more than 143 people applied for a license, but a significant number did not complete the process for one reason or another. We had nearly 1,500 acres approved for hemp cultivation last year, spread among those 143 license holders. The information on this slide was taken from the grower's annual report, which was due on November 30th. We have some growers that are delinquent in submitting the report, so then this information is from about 80% of the growers who have submitted the report. So the acreage planted and harvested is certain to go up when all reports are in. As of December 2nd, 28 license holders reported they did not plant hemp last year after obtaining a license. We had 360 acres that were actually planted, about 270 acres of that was harvested, and about 24 acres had to be disposed of due to non-compliant cannabis. And we'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. And we see a similar trend with greenhouses in that more greenhouses were approved than were actually used for hemp cultivation. From conversations with growers, and I spoke with several growers last year, I think a number of folks use 2020 as a learning year. Things like, well, how to grow hemp in Georgia, weed management, varieties to plant, and so forth. As you can see, 64% of the growers in Georgia last year were licensed for 1 to 5 acres, and most of them did not plant that. They were approved to use that amount, but again, it was a learning year from the conversations that I've had with the growers. And we see similar with greenhouses. Roughly 60% had one greenhouse, and the types of greenhouses ran the gamut from your very large commercial greenhouses to what you would call a backyard greenhouse. And quite a number of the growers actually were approved to produce hemp in both the greenhouse as well as in the ground. And we did have some folks that applied and were approved for larger acreage, but by and large it was smaller acreage that folks planted in 2020. And I know many of you guys are interested in THC results. I was pleasantly surprised with our results in 2020. I had talked with my colleagues in other states, and over the years, I was expecting the worst for THC results. Many states saw quite a number of failing samples the first 2 years of their program, and I was expecting the same thing. But I was pleasantly surprised. Probably listening to growers in other states and using those varieties was helpful to our growers. As you can see, the vast majority of our samples were below 0.3% THC, which is good. You see that number of 48 that's between 0.3% and 0.39%. That does not mean that all of those samples failed. USDA did something I was actually pleased with. They included the measurement of uncertainty with hemp results. And the reason for that is no matter how good a measurement is or the lab equipment is, there's always some uncertainty with measurements, measuring systems, equipment. So this is taken into consideration, and the lab has to calculate that measurement of uncertainty. So as long as the result was less than 0.3% plus the measure of uncertainty, the sample passed. So out of this 48, most of those samples did pass, which was good news. Now, as you can see, we did have some samples that had quite a bit of THC in them. So if a sample failed, the grower had one of three options. The grower could simply take the result and dispose of the crop. The grower could ask for that same sample to be tested again, or the grower could request a second sample to be collected and submitted. Now, after that second sample, whether it was a retest or a new sample collected, we went with that result. Now, these are not all of the varieties that were grown in Georgia last year. In fact, we did not ask for variety names. It probably would have been a good thing for us to do that, but we did not. But a number of growers provided variety names to us, and I'm glad they did. So in this slide, I took the 5 most commonly reported varieties and listed those, and then I listed the other varieties that tested above 0.3% THC. And your right-hand column is the number of samples that tested above that. So you can look at Super CBD had 13 growers reported growing that variety, and 2 of those samples tested over 0.3%. Like I said, unfortunately, we did have some cannabis that tested over 0.3% THC. Technically and legally, cannabis that is over that threshold is not hemp. We've referred to it as non-compliant cannabis or something else, but legally it's marijuana. 11 different growers had non-compliant cannabis, and some growers had more than one variety to come back over the limit, so they had to dispose of multiple varieties. USDA also allowed growers this year options other than simple or only incineration. Disposal methods include mowing and plowing. You couldn't just mow it, you had to plow it in, which was good. A little bit of a soil amendment, maybe a little expensive soil amendment, but that was an option. And just a reminder, producing cannabis that's over 0.3% is a violation. And so we will be entering into agreements with those growers. I want to say a few words about sampling. There's only one official sample required, and with 15 days of harvest, the hemp sample must be collected. That is the official sample. We have a sampling agent. It's agricultural audits. It's a part of Georgia Crop Improvement. They will collect the sample and submit to the lab of your choice as long as the lab has an agreement with us to perform sampling and perform according to Georgia and USDA requirements. Now, the grower is responsible for all sampling, laboratory analysis, and disposal cost. I certainly believe it's a good idea for growers to submit their own samples to the lab of their choice during the growing season to monitor THC levels, especially when you start getting close to that window where you want to harvest and still be below that 0.3% THC. I think a lot of growers that I talked to were saying, yes, that they intend to do more sampling this year as well. And some of the research coming out of Cornell and the University of Kentucky indicates that THC levels can spike in as little as 10 to 14 days once plants begin to flower. So once you get into that point in your crop where flowering begins, you really need to stay on top of your testing and make preparation to have the sample tested. And that's your official sample, and do your harvest. I do want to mention that the harvest must be done within 15 days. So if you do not get your crop harvested within 15 days, another sample is required to be collected on that crop. The last thing I want to talk about today is smokable hemp flower. We probably received more questions on this last year, and there's some things in the law are ambiguous. Unfortunately, we are not able to provide any more information or clarification in addition to what's in the statute. If you have more questions or need clarification in addition to what's in the statute, we recommend that you consult with a private attorney, a prosecuting attorney, or someone who is able to give you valid legal advice. There are two parts of the law. One part, as you can see here, states that it is unlawful to offer for sale at retail the unprocessed flower or leaves of the hemp plant. And the definition of processing is definitely a little bit ambiguous there. It says this term does not include merely placing raw or dry material into a container or packaging raw material for resale. Again, if there are questions in addition to that, you need to speak with someone who can give you some valid legal advice. And I think this is a good point now to also remind you that the Act also limits a grower on who the grower can sell the crop to. A grower can only sell to another grower or a processor, or to a Georgia university that is eligible to do research on hemp. A grower in Georgia cannot sell to the end user. And with that, I do thank you for your time, and I'm finished. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tim. I think the recording went well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I learned a lot, actually, from how things went.
Me too, actually. I was listening thoroughly. Thank you, Mike. So do you have any questions? I think on January, you have a schedule for the live event. We will play this video, and then we'll transition to the live portion where you can answer questions from the audience. All right?
Okay.
All right. I think we're good. And we're done for today. Thank you, Mike, for joining, and also Timothy. Do you have any questions for me?
No, I think I'm good. I think I'll be on Monday with Juan Carlos doing an organic session one, but no worries. I'm good.
Thank you, Timothy. Thank you, Mike.
Guys, I know it was a headache trying to get me on this with all our things, but man, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, it really happens, and we're also would like to apologize for that yesterday. But today, everything went well. So everything is perfect with the recording. So we're looking forward to working with you in January.
All right, thank you. But no, that was me. I thought the office would be better, but my IT guy said, nope, your home's better. So we got it done. So I'll be here this next time.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So on the live event, it's better if you'll stay home and do that presentation at home.
Okay. All right. Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend, too. See you in January.
All right.
I'm ending the webcast now. Goodbye.